Nice to connect, and looking forward to chatting with you about music and the role it plays in advertising. And you've had a great career, man. You've done a lot of good stuff, and here to get to know more about your story. Obviously you're a musician, right, and creative at heart. But how did you get into both creative and music? How did it all start?
When you're a little kid, you don't really understand that, like, oh, there's all these opportunities for me to express myself creatively. You don't have that cognitive, ability to, you don't have that life experience to be able to look around and just be like, all right, I'm going to express myself through woodworking. Uh, you know, right? So it's like you use what you have in front of you. And I think thankfully my folks had at least like a guitar that was, like a classical guitar, like a little nylon string classical guitar that I used to mess around on. So at least there was like some sort of an instrument at home growing up. But then beyond that, my school, they put us into, through the music program like at a very early age. So we were playing um, concert instruments at like 8, 7. I think I picked up the trumpet when I was like 7. So, which was at that point longer than I am tall. So carrying around like huge
Yeah.
that I can barely even wrap my hands around the valves. But it was a little bit of that, and I had a really great, the music program there where I went in Pleasant Hill was really great. In fact, the high school jazz program was, um, this is going to sound like such a nerd thing, but it was actually really cool. We would win every festival we went to, and like it was like that for like decades. The teacher who was in charge of that program, Mike Wiggins, was, he was nationally revered and just an amazing teacher. And I learned so much from him just as that I pull through beyond just music, but leadership all the way through to what I do today. But he noticed me, or I guess like grabbed me from junior high school and brought me up to the high school for, to be in the jazz band and the high school jazz band. So um, the being able to be forced to try to, compete and play with people who were 3, 4, 5 years, 6 years older than I was quite a gift in that way. And it really helped me excel, and being exposed to more instruments there at that time, like you're not just playing concert band, trumpets and trombones and drummers that just have a snare in front of them and a couple of drum picks, but actually like a real drum set, like a real full kit, piano, a bass guitar in a jazz band, I mean, those kinds of things, a regular guitar in a jazz band, like those kinds of things, being exposed to that really opened up my world at a pretty young age. So I worked really hard to like learn different instruments and, being able to express myself like that as a kid where, I grew up in the middle of nowhere. So there was no kids down the street to go ride bikes, with, at night. It was like I came home and that's all I had, whatever instrument I had around with me. We didn't even get TV channels. So I really focused a lot on that. And then because of that, sorry, I'm getting around to answering your question.
No, no, this is all
That,
good, man. This is all good.
okay. Well, all right, all right. And you because of that, you get very comfortable with your own creativity at a very young age. And I think that in this industry, the biggest thing that I have to work with, our employees, creatives with is learning how to make amends with their creative process and not work again and let it work against them. And that's one of the hardest things for people who are, you know, learning how to be creative, at least in the way that we need them to be in advertising, learning how to be creative, when you're in college and just being like, oh, I'm going to be a copywriter now. It's tough because, everyone talks about how many years you have in the industry, but like as a creative, it's like more like how many years do you have as a creative? And so being, I mean, I've started being creative, I guess, in that way, from a musical perspective, like what, a little less than 40 years ago. So it's like I've, I've been like making friends and making things with my creativity since I was, 7, 6, 6, 5, 6, 7, somewhere in there. So that's I would say that that's really the impetus of it. It's being able to express yourself at a very early age like that. You really learn how to point that creativity in any direction you want. So whether it was writing music for, the band that got signed to the label, that I was in, or, writing ads, it's no different. It's all just like being able to align your energy with your creative self.
Yeah. I was like I didn't know this, but I mean, one of the early campaigns that you worked on was the Kenny Powers K-Swiss campaign. And I
Mhm.
was like looking into it and how that led you to work with Danny McBride at Eastbound and Down. So like curious how that all came to be. That's I didn't know this. Uh that's
Yeah.
a good nugget.
Yeah, it was a pivotal point in my career actually. I was working at 72 and Sunny because I was there very early days. When I was there was very few people there. It was kind of in its seminal stage. And then I think it was only like 2 or 3 years into my career at that point. And I was working with Matt Murphy, who's now one of the Mount Olympus guys at 72 and Sunny. Um, I don't even know what his title is anymore. Uber creative, uh, creative Uber alles. And he and I, though he was creative director, but he and I were the team on that campaign and well on that brand. And then we one night just came up with the idea with the for the to use Kenny Powers as a spokesperson for a brand that didn't have Nike money, and wrote it up and presented it to him. And I remember David, the CEO of David Nichols, the CEO of K-Swiss at that time. We presented the idea, and he looked at us and he was like, "We just have to do this, don't we?" And we're like, "Yeah." So that was kind of it was a big swing, but we were adept at those things at 72 back in those days, and yeah, so we did the first two campaigns. Long story short, did the one where he gets signed by K-Swiss, and then the next one was the MF CEO where he becomes the CEO of K-Swiss, and pretty much right after we ended that, it was on that last shoot day of the MF CEO campaign, the second campaign. Danny called me into his trailer and was just like, "Hey, you've written some of my favorite Kenny Powers jokes ever. We're writing season 3 right now and could really use your voice on this. Would you? I don't want to get in the way of your advertising thing, but would you come and write for the show?" And I was my advertising thing. Not way, no, no. I was
I don't want
super.
to get in the way of your advertising.
Yeah, I was like, wait a minute, hold on a second. Well, let's get the priorities straight here. No, no, no. So it's like I absolutely loved my job. But I was went and talked to Glenn at 72, and I was just like, "Hey, Danny asked me to come write for the show," and he was like, "You got to take it." And he was like, "You have an open door here, forever. So like whenever you want to come back." So went and wrote for season 3 of Eastbound, and got to write with Danny and Will Ferrell and all those guys and the other handful of writers that were also on the show, and it was an amazing, amazing experience. I mean,
I'm
I
sure.
learned, and then eventually ended up going back to 72 by way of the CAA marketing group that Jay Goodman led. But yeah, I went back to 72 eventually and ran Samsung Mobile, and the rest is kind of history after that. But yeah.
Yeah. No, no, for sure. And like obviously like you've been playing music since you were 7 years old, and music is so important in advertising. So I'm curious, like, obviously there's a lot of successful creatives that are not musicians, right? But I'm curious if the fact that you have that music background in you, music is in your blood, right? Do you sort of like it's just sort of like a different you basically feel it differently, right? Um, you didn't live, it's a different story. So I'm curious if you feel things in a different way, if you know, think about campaigns differently. Do you feel music first? Do you tend to go that route instead of how a creative that doesn't have that music background would? Curious your thoughts on that.
I don't know because I don't live their experience. But I do feel like, I mean, music is a language, so it's like either you speak it or you don't. What's interesting about that language in particular, though, is everyone can understand it. Um, like whether you play an instrument and or have a doctorate in music theory, like it doesn't really matter. You can still listen to music and understand. I mean, lyrics aside, you can understand the emotion that's behind it. So it's a language that all humans are fluent in. But even though you can't sit down and write it, or speak it necessarily,
Yeah.
understand it. So I think. Um, to that point, I do think that it is either innate to you or not, whether you have music as a tool in your toolbox for advertising, because not everybody does. Some people will just be like, all right, yeah, we want this to be a song, and we're just gonna take this other song that's famous, from the 80s, and we're just gonna redo the lyrics for it to like kind of, like for Long John Silver's, we're gonna do like simply irresistible, but it's gonna be shrimply irresistible or something. It's like this like shrimp, promotion that they're doing. Uh, but then there's another way to using music, and that's understanding like what music does for a spot. Should music even be used in a spot? I think a lot of creatives, or brands even, they just assume that there needs to be music in a campaign, because that's just how it's done. I thought a lot of times I don't want music at all in spots. Like I just don't think that it belongs. And if it does, like, it's sometimes it's in the form of sound design, and it's more of like, what kind of an emotion are you trying to convey? And I think that people don't really get down to the bottom of that always. I mean, I think that, there's definitely some people who get it, and who don't necessarily play instruments, but it is a lot to consider there. So I think we definitely come at stuff at Partyland with an opportunity to make a song and have it be an original song, have it be something that's ownable and unique to that brand and that campaign. I try not to just do the easy thing of like licensing a song or doing a parody of another song. Like that just is too easy to me. Not to say that's bad,
Mm.
for anyone who does it, but it's just not how we go about it. We want to be more inventive than that here. So all that's to say, do I think that creativity comes differently to me than to other people? I don't think so. I think it all comes, to us from a different
Yeah.
place, you know.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people that have like an amazing ear and know a lot about music and they don't play music. They don't play an instrument, right? So
Right.
like,
They're
and it's
producers.
just yeah, exactly. But there's just like it's just such a powerful tool in the creative
Mhm.
toolbox, right? And it's like why not rely on it? And you've done amazing campaigns at Partyland,
I think,
talking about music, right? Like I think the first campaign that comes to mind is the Everyman Jack Still Smells Good campaign. Like
mm,
it's just such a clever use of it, and just obviously you at Partyland, it's all like it's all about, comedy, right? You call yourselves like a comedy's greatest ad agency, right? So,
yeah.
yeah, just talk about sort of like that campaign. How did it start, and why was it so successful?
Also one of my favorite campaigns. So thank you for pointing at that. Well, and we did find out that, eventually, like as the campaign played out, it was very successful. So it was a very effective campaign for that brand, which obviously makes me more excited than anything. That's all we
Mm.
really care about in the end. Making great work that leads to efficacy. So that one, we had gone a couple of rounds on the brief, which was a little uncommon for us. We typically like get a brief pretty quickly and understand how to solve it. The brief shifted just a little bit because the more we explored it, the more we realized, okay, let's simplify, simplify, simplify. So with the brand, we kind of got to the, like what are the things that we want to say more than anything? They were like that it lasts a long time, and then that it smells good. Like it's, a good smelling brand. They have lots of, really great scents, for that brand, for that product, for their deodorant. And so I was like, okay, well, why don't we just simplify it? Like how do we simplify that into its most, digestible terms? And was like, okay, so for efficacy, so for, that it works, you can say still. So no matter like how long you wear it, it still smells good. And then for smells, it was just, yeah, the smell part. So I was like, okay, so if you want to translate that brief into a creative expression, it's every man Jack, no matter what, every man Jack still smells good. And I was like, all right, well, why don't we just turn that into a song? Because it lends itself well to that because it's just a little bite-sized, really powerful, little sentence there, a little thought, thought nugget. And so I was just like, what if we just say it over and over? So use every man jack and you'll still smell good. Ride your mountain bike and you'll still smell good. Crash into some hornets and fall down a mountain and you'll still smell good. Die for 7 seconds and you still smell good. It was just like, I mean, it was pretty simple. And so I wrote the lyrics to the song and kind of the cadence for it. And this was one where we didn't do the music ourselves here. We went and worked with a really great partner. Um, and I will try to remember exactly the name of that partner because they're so wonderful. Walker, goodness, I can't believe that I
Yeah.
forgot. Brain fart, Walker, they're amazing. And I just told them, I'm like, all right, so for the music, I want, kind of three sort of concentric circles, and you'll hit the middle. I want real instruments. I don't want it to be MIDI keyboard, cheapy sounding crap. I want like real actual instruments that are mic'd properly and played well. Then I want kind of a Bob Seger kind of a vibe to it, like that. It seemed like it wanted that kind of like 80s, big, big emotion coming through in the vocals, with like background vocals that were kind of, big and choral in that way. And then I said the third circle needs to be cocaine. So Bob Seger, real instruments and cocaine. Like, and if you do that, you'll have hit the musical center of this thing, and then obviously then take these lyrics and put them in there in this cadence. And they did a fantastic job with that. So and then yeah, we went and shot it, and there's no dialogue in that spot, which is great. It's just so we got to have a lot of fun with the shoot and the performance and the physical comedy of it, and then put the song over the top, and it all worked, and the work worked. So
Yeah, no, it's brilliant, brilliant.
proud of
Everything
that.
about it. And then you mentioned something interesting. Um, you mentioned not every campaign needs music, right? You know, and a lot of times that you have a lot of campaigns where there's a lot of VO, um, and they put a track in the background, and so the track competes with the VO, or um, so I mean, definitely like not every campaign needs VO, right? It's like it's not necessarily. It's like just depends, right? But you want to let the creative breathe. Um, so it's just interesting how you mentioned that in this specific campaign, like it was just all about, like the music played a pivotal role, and so a lot of times, like let the music play a pivotal role,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, well, I think just like, when you're writing music that has nothing to do with advertising, just, for your band or for yourself or whatever, um, dynamic is incredibly important, right? If you just come out screaming, it's all just going to be one screen. Like there's no journey in the music. There's no journey in the energy, right? So, yeah. And sometimes, it's going to be a vocally led song as opposed to like an instrumentally led song, or sometimes just like the song just wants to be an acoustic song instead of, an electric guitar and like a full band ensemble. So you've really got to pay attention to what that piece of creative wants to be, and what really needs to be the thing that stands out about it. Recently we did a campaign it was actually the first campaign we did for Men's Warehouse, and it was about a guy who basically essentially becomes addicted to like using Men's Warehouse as like the thing for all of his, things that he has to, dress up for, whether it's golf or a job interview or whatever. And there's a lot of agitation in that campaign. The main character was really he was nervous about all these things out there because men are about getting dressed sometimes. Like it's getting dressed is awkward. And like we weren't taught how to do it, right? There wasn't a class that taught us how to do it. And there's not a lot of good role models for how to get dressed or how to make our clothes look right on our bods. And so this guy and this character was, rightfully nervous about those things, but he had, like Men's Warehouse was always there to like, kind of have his back on that situation. But that character itself is a lot of nervous and a lot of anxiety. And I just kind of felt like I wanted him and his the way that he used his voice, for like, or like, okay, I gotta go, I will be right back. It's like I didn't want to get in the way of any of that stuff because that projected his where he was emotionally much better than trying to tell people what to think with a music track. And so in that one I was like, well, let's just do like a drum solo underneath it, and one that doesn't even particularly like stay on time. Maybe the cymbal crashes are a little too obnoxious. Maybe it's just like what's the soundtrack to anxiety really, and it didn't need a bass line or a guitar line or a melody. It just needed like a kind of a percussive thing to keep the energy moving forward, to help out the edit just a little bit. But yeah, I don't believe that everything needs music. In fact, it's if you use music as a bed, like you better need it. It better be there for a reason. It's just like that Arby's campaign that we did. The We Have the Meats campaign. I was a CD on that when we and writer when we launched it, and one of the writers, and Charlie Wolf was the other writer on it, and was just a fantastic writer. But
Mm.
writing that campaign was just like, I don't want anything in there. I only want Ving Rhames' voice and like the meats, like no music whatsoever in the entirety of the spot. In fact, for the first 2.5 years of that campaign, until I ended up leaving, at least, there was never music in anything that was there. If there was music at all, it was Ving Rhames singing, as and to
Yeah.
no music. There was actually one campaign where we did music. It was the goodbye to John. Gosh, names are just escaping me in this thing. But from the what was it, The Late Show? No, that was David Letterman. Who did it? John? What's his name? That always used to mess with Arby's. I'm always forgetting. Anyways, we'll edit this part out.
Yeah, oh
There
yeah.
was one where we did like Bing. We had Bing sing the Golden Girls theme song, to him because he was always fucking with us. But yeah, there was no music in that because it just didn't need it. It had something to say and didn't need to convey any other emotion other than, just what
Letterman.
it. No, no, that's David Letterman. It was John Stewart. Jesus Christ.
John Stewart. There you go.
I was
One
like,
thing
why
leads
am
to
I
another.
forgetting like one of the most
We got it.
important
We got it. We got it.
cultural figures of the last 20 years. It's okay. My brain works. Yeah, that one was fun. That had music in it, but it needed it. Anyway, so yeah, that whole campaign didn't have music on purpose until that stinger at the end, which was that Pusha T track. Burial, I think was the name of it, and it accentuated the Ving yelling, "We have the meats," over the top of the logo, and I wanted the music in there because I wanted to use that as an exclamation point to, hey, we meant what we just said about the meats, all that stuff that you just listened to for 30 seconds or 15 seconds. Yeah, we fucking meant that with a song that just punched you in the face there at the end. And obviously Ving's We Have the Meats was an important aspect of that
Yeah.
too. So,
Yeah. It's still going to this day. Um,
yep, still is.
and I think it's going to keep on going.
For better or for worse, it's still going.
Yeah. I mean, it's like music is, it's like, I think more and more people know that it's so valuable, but it's always still treated as an afterthought. Why do you think that is, Matt? Like, why do certain people still, oh, let me just put whatever stock track there, or we have 2 days to ship, let's just put whatever track in there. Um, Obviously, not all of it. I'm not generalizing. Like, there's a lot of people that care about music and do it right, but there's
Mhm.
still a majority amount of brands and agencies sometimes that see it as an afterthought. Why do you think that is? Or maybe they prioritize other elements of the campaign and not music. But knowing its value, knowing that it's like one of the biggest like memory recall uh tools that we have, like, why is it still such an afterthought? Why do you think that is?
Um, I think everyone just kind of goes to where they're, when it comes to being creative, especially when you're under the gun, when a brief comes in, it's just like you've got like sometimes 2 days, to answer this brief. A week these days is a luxury to
Hmm.
get to an answer. And I think because of that, people tend to, rest on or just go back. I was going to say rest on their laurels, and I think there probably is some of that, but that sounds a little negative, but and lazy. And I don't think it's laziness. I think it's just if you're a good writer, sometimes you just go to dialogue. If you're
Hmm.
great art directors, sometimes you just go, I'm going to solve this visually because I don't have time to sit there and, figure out like something, or I don't have the energy or even like, again,
Mm.
the time, the resources to be able to just be like, you know what we're going to do? We're going to write a song. And I've never written a song before. I'm not a musician, and that's just what this is going to be. And then they're like, all right, cool. Your creative director can be like, yeah, I'm in support of that. But like, so what is the song? And you're like, fuck. I don't know. Because you're not a musician. You can't like, you can't demonstrate it. You can't demo the thing. You're like, all right, well at best I wrote some lyrics, and you're like, all right, but what does it sound like? And everyone's like, I don't fucking know. So so I think there's that. If you can't write music, it doesn't come naturally to you, then it is tough to, bring your idea to life in that way. It's easier now with AI. You can probably ape it a little bit, and you can be like, you can have AI kind of write the song for you. So I think you'll probably see some more of more music happening. And honestly, like it feels like there is more music happening these days.
For sure,
Probably
for
because of
sure.
that. Probably because of that. Because all you have to do is just like, hey, I've got this idea. Here's the lyrics, and I want it to be a country song. Like, give me 10 examples of that. And like, you can pick the one you like there that's closest to your vision or what you want it to be, and then present it, and then have that be the thing. So in that way, that's amazing, right? That's so cool that people can express themselves, in a way that they weren't maybe trained to do. Um, but again, you can always kind of tell when it comes from somebody's brain. If AI is always just going to give you something generic anyway. So it's at best you got a generic version of your unique idea. And it's always going to feel a little generic, I think, until you work with other people to kind of beat the internet stealing out of it and make it an ownable piece of content. But I think the afterthought thing just kind of comes for like I don't think a lot of people think about it. I think there's a lot of people out there who's just like, well, this every commercial has a song in it, better put a song in it, or it just needs some energy. Like I hear that a lot. Like, oh, I think our idea needs energy. Let's put music into it. And if your idea requires music or a musical, some sort of musical bed in it to, give it any energy, it's like I think you better think twice about the edit. The edit maybe needs to, bring something a little bit more, or, you should have thought earlier and been like, we should have gotten better performances, or the dialogue could have been better, or the VO could have been better, or the visuals, like we should have gotten, talked to the director earlier about making something that was going to have more energy to it. If we so I don't think that people think that far forward. You don't think, or shall I say, they don't think from the edit backwards. And you have to be in the industry and been doing this for a long time to be able to do that, right? It's like, okay, how do I get a successful edit? And you
Yeah.
start thinking about in the creative process, right when you get briefed. And we do that a lot at Partyland. And coach the teams to just be like, all right, think about what the edit needs to be. Like it's almost like what's the end of the book, before you start writing the book. You always have to
Mm.
think about what's because the end is always the hardest part to figure out. So if you have an answer for what it's going to be at the very end, you know how to work forward to that end. It's hard when you start writing a book and you don't have any idea of like what it's going to be. And you're just like, okay, and then it's like, oh fuck, this is a really boring book. And then he gets murdered, and it's just like, wait a minute, that's cheating. You're just like manufacturing energy now. And ads are a lot like that. So I think that people, don't think backwards from the edit. They don't you know, think about all the elements right away. And some of that is usually a product of just not having done this a lot, and so
Yeah,
it's
and it's also a lot of problem solving when it's advertising. I mean, we've also been doing this for a bit, and clients start with an idea, pitch to client, the idea ends up changing a little bit, and so various iterations, and then you end up with something that originally is not the same. You always have the client to please,
Mhm.
and client is always right in a way, right? So you're always working towards that, and you might start a project and you're hoping to go in this direction musically, but then all of a sudden you have to change. That means you have to change the vendors and the partners you're working with, right? All of a sudden, you need to do reshoots and this, like it's just never ending. So that's why, like, when it comes to music, it's always good to have different options, different people that you can rely on, right? And I think more so like also creatives but also producers, the more people you know in the space, like the more you can navigate through those challenges, right? um because you never know where these projects might go, what turn they might take, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. It's tough. It's rough out there, man.
It's rough out there.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And then the other campaign that I want to ask you about is the Holy Veggie campaign. How did that one came to be? What was so special about that one?
Mm. So that are you going to be showing the spots in the
Yes.
okay, okay.
Yes. Yeah, yeah,
I'm like, do I need to explain this?
yeah.
How much do I need to explain? So that campaign, well, 'cause first of all, that brand, really lovely brand, lovely people that work on it. They're just the best. I really enjoyed that project so much. Ideal clients in that way. You come to a brand, or well, they came to us to, work together, but you come to a brand with an idea like that one. And it takes a lot of vision and trust to be able to say yes to a campaign that's going to work against the trends in the rest of that category. So in that category for plant-based snack food, essentially, everything is very wholesome. Even if we did an exercise where you put all the brands next to each other, all the logos, and like, I mean, if you squint, you can't even really tell the difference between most of the logos
Yeah.
because there's, everyone's kind of, all trying to do the same thing. And that brand, really got it. They were like, hey, everyone's going this way. We want to go the opposite direction. And like, how do we do that? In that even started it, from their product. They were making pizza, they were making, chicken wings. They were making, out of not chicken, obviously, but they were making mozzarella sticks, out of plant-based products. And so snack food, for people who who don't want to eat meat and or for people who don't want to feed their kids meat-based products, and then even to their product design, like their packaging design, excuse me, was very bright and really popped. It was beautiful. They did a great job with that, and we were like, okay, well, how can we come up with a campaign that also does a similar thing, kind of goes in the opposite direction of the way that the rest of the category is doing. And so we didn't have a lot of money because at that time they were a startup. And so we knew we were going to have to be kind of scrappy. And we also felt like we just needed to say the name of the brand a lot and, talk about, what they do differently and why you would use them, and what they're for. And, things like, getting your kids to eat better, getting yourself to eat better, getting, that person, that you're, married to who doesn't like to eat, plants, like getting them to eat plants, trying to force them to, a more varied palate. So, I mean, the idea really came from, just like because everybody wants to say that vegetables taste good, and the truth is they don't. I mean, they do. Like as adults, we're like, yeah, yeah, we like I fuck with tomatoes. Like I like carrots. I like celery. But like when you're a kid, like kids don't lie. The kids don't eat plants because they don't taste good. And so I remember we did an exercise where we went on because that was a kind of our assumption because at first the brand was like, yeah, it's like it's vegetables and it's delicious and blah blah blah. And it's like as adults and as a brand, we want people to think that they're delicious because we know it's important to eat, but it is an acquired taste, and a lot of people don't ever acquire that taste, especially as adults. And it was just like there was millions of tweets that were just talking about like how gross vegetables are. What I mean? It's like you couldn't escape it. It was like people are like vegetables are fucking hot garbage. I will not
Yeah,
eat
you
them.
have to be very creative to get them to eat
Yeah, right.
broccoli.
So our whole premise was like, yeah, vegetables are kind of gross, and gross tasting at least, and which is crazy for that category because everyone was just like, no, they're delicious, always eat them, and that's coming from somebody I love vegetables, man. But at least I do now. So that was, kind of the tagline was, haha, you just ate vegetables, and was all of, and so the campaign, lined up really nicely with the product, which is like it's easy to trick people into eating vegetables if they come in fun, form factors like pizza and, and mozzarella sticks and stuff like that. So really it was that, and I was just like, all right, well, none of these brands would ever do like a punk rock song or like a pseudo metal song, so like why don't we just do that? And because we didn't have much of a budget, I just wrote the song myself and sang it and played guitar and bass on it. And then a creative director we had at Partyland at the time was a great drummer. And then he and I just went and tracked all three of the spots. It was the same song but different lyrics for each of the three spots, and it turned out really stupid. And again, very very effective for that brand. I mean, so if there's a theme, it's like the music that we make here, and the reason why we use so much music is because it really does end up being a very, very useful tool, effective tool for brands that it aligns with. Music's not going to be the way we do music is not going to be right for every brand. Not every brand should do something that's like a big theatrical song or whatever, or any version of that. Sometimes it needs to be more dialogue driven, but for the brands where it aligns with their kind of brand attributes and their energy, it definitely can crush.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. You guys total like you guys get it. Um, yeah, I mean, what advice would you give to sort of like aspiring creatives, people that are coming up, you know, other agencies, sort of like, how to approach, music and yeah, I guess what advice would you give to aspiring creatives?
Well, I think a really good example is the JanSport work that we've done now. Again, I keep this as a theme. I keep saying it. Sounds like I'm plugging Partyland as if I work there. Uh, the JanSport work that we've done, both campaigns that we've done for them with the singing, and like first it was like the people singing to their backpack, and then this campaign that's just come up now, or that we just launched about a couple of months ago now, with the singing backpacks. So we kind of flipped it from singing backpack owners to backpack singing to the owners. Those songs were written by Eli White, a creative at Partyland, and he's not a musician, and he will even say he's like, I don't know what the f I'm doing, like, but we encouraged him, and like he had kind of came up with the idea, and we were like, well, why don't we just like go really far, like hard at that? Like, let's not make perfect songs. Let's make, completely imperfect songs. It's like, the idea was like when you're getting up in the morning, your dog's sitting on your bed looking at you while you're getting dressed, and you're just like, he is just a little baby dog. It was like you just sing like stupid songs to your dog or your kids or whatever. And like, let's just do that. And like, let's not sing well. Let's not like make the music, very precise. Let's pretend like it's somebody who's just learning their instruments. I remember we sent a video of like a band of children trying to play a Green Day song, like 8-year-olds trying to, they weren't even big enough to like maneuver their instruments correctly. And I sent that to the music company that did all the work for us on that, and I was like, just make it like that. Stop being a professional musician. Just record it once and don't record it again. Like, I don't want to hear you. I want to hear missed notes. And that goes for the singers as well. I want to hear missed notes. I don't want, in fact, hire singers for this stuff that they don't know how to sing. If they're a professional singer or can hold a tune, I don't want them on here. We wanted it to be something that felt very natural and normal and very, like, oh, I sing like that when I'm in the car. So I would
People
say
relate to that, right?
it's,
People
yeah,
relate to that.
100%. Yeah, I mean, there's a story. Gosh, I'm just going to keep this podcast going for a million hours here, aren't I? But there's a
I love it.
interview that a band called No Effects they gave, I think it was probably 10 or 15 years ago now, but it always stuck with me, which was they were a punk rock band, they started in the 80s, where just like screaming and, not being good at your instruments was like, part of their sound. And then after 35 years of playing music, punk rock, it's like they got really fucking good at their instruments, and they kind of lost that, like, that edge to their, that punk rock edge to their sound. And so what they started doing in order to kind of like retain that was they would write a song, they would learn it really quickly, and they would just record it once and they wouldn't fix any of the parts. And that was how they tried to like recreate that, that sound of, punk rockness when they were too good at their instruments to be able to like, pull that off anymore. It's like you can't fuck up, you're just too good. So so we wanted to, we're basically told the composers, at these companies we were working with for that JanSport work, just like remember what it was like. In fact, if you feel like you're playing it too well, get your kid to come in and play it. Like, what happens? Like,
That's hilarious.
yeah, don't make it good. Make it intentionally, not bad, but
Just
imprecise.
not make don't make it perfect. Don't auto tune. Don't add like all the
And
like
that's so
just
hard. That's so hard for these people because they're
especially
like,
nowadays. Yeah.
especially because they were like, once after they nailed it, because it did take them a little bit to nail it, but once they nailed it, they were like, every agency comes to us and wants it to be like perfect, like everything in its right place, like at the the build has to be correct, like it has to like have energy and all this stuff. And I was like, yeah, I wanted you to break all those rules and just be like an 8-year-old sitting in their room with like a guitar, like trying to bang out a song about, why they're pissed at their dad because they got their video games taken away. You know what I mean? It's like that's what I want. That's the energy I wanted. And they ended up nailing it. But all that goes back to your point, or your original question, which is like, what advice do I have to give? Just do it. Sorry, wow, that sounded like a tagline. Like if you like, it doesn't have to be perfect. And there's so many partners out there that like if you want to bring your idea to life through music or something like that, like just figure out like the best way to put it together. And then, like I said, use AI to be able to like, approximate your idea and then go and find real people who play real instruments to go and make a real song for it. But educate yourself too. It's just like we all worked to be good writers or art directors or whatever, or strategists or whatever it is that we do that, because everybody contributes to the creative solution of a campaign.
Yeah.
Nobody ever goes to like, learn about music and learns music theory and learns about like why to use music or how to use music. Like be curious, because music has always been one of the most important ways that we communicate with one another as human beings. Not to mention how brands can communicate with their audiences, and if you can be an arbiter of that language, on behalf of your brands, why not?
There you go. Amazing, Matt. Thank you so much, man. This was great. Thanks for
Thank
spending
you.
time, and we'll keep in touch. And thanks for everything. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was really fun.